Welcome to an edition of GW Unspoken, where we discuss stuff we don't typically talk about, but probably should. And we're here talking about our social and emotional well-being episodes. And today we're talking about our emotional first aid and what can we do in our first 5 minutes of a crisis. 5 minutes. That's all it takes for a crisis to carve itself into our memory. And the first 5 minutes after an emotional explosion, whether your teenager shouting they hate you, or your boss questioning your value, or maybe a late night phone call that changes everything, even after a good day, those minutes set the stage for everything that follows. You think about it, when someone collapses with chest pain, we rush to do CPR. You know, when someone slices a finger, we apply pressure, we stop the bleeding, we wrap it up, we give them nurturing care. But when someone's heart is breaking or rage is spilling out or fear grips the room, we stand there and we're lost. Like, how many times have you actually asked someone how they're going and they tell you, but then you say, you know, how are you emotionally going? And there's no real response because, well, even if they gave you a response, what would be your response after that? What would you do? All of us wouldn't feel equipped. But that's probably the things that take its toll the most is our emotional regulation and our emotional hurt. So this episode is about the first aid kit that nobody gave us, the emotional first aid kit. You know, the small actions you can take in those first 5 minutes of crisis that, you know, just might save the relationship or, you know, even a life. So here's part one. The science of a crisis. Like, when crisis hits, the brain gets hijacked. I've talked about this a lot around neuroscience, like the amygdala, that almond-sized alarm system in the middle of our brain. It lights up like a fire alarm, flooding the body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and your heart races and your breathing shortens and your muscles tense. You might start sweating and it's out of your control. And that prefrontal cortex, you know, the rational problem-solving, the thinking part of your brain, it doesn't say anything. It's stupid right now. Part of your brain goes offline. And this is why you can't use logic, you know, when someone's in the middle of a meltdown. And it's why your teen doesn't calm down when you tell them just to relax. And it's why you might say things you regret later because your rational brain has literally left the building. You know, I've said this before, but how many times have you had an argument and then an hour, 2 hours later, maybe half a day later, you've gone, what the hell just happened then? You know, it's our thinking brain, our rational brain going offline because our amygdala takes over. And look, here's the kicker. It takes about 20 minutes for the body to return to baseline after a surge of adrenaline. And that changes with everybody. But around 20 minutes. So in those first 5 minutes, you can actually change the trajectory of where it's going. You know, think of it like a defib for the soul. What you do in those moments really matter in those first 5 minutes. So number two, what emotional first aid really looks like. What do you do? Let's make this practical so you can actually, you know, step away from this episode and try it in your own lives. Slow breathing tells your body you are safe. I've done this before, 4-7-8 method. Like, inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, and exhale for 8 out of your mouth. And it's like CPR for your nervous system. I've done this before with staff and people nearly going red in the face and look like they're going to blow a gasket because they're holding their breath for so long because they're not used to doing it. But like a big inhale for 4 seconds in through your nose, hold it for 7, and breathe out for your 8, and out of your mouth for 8. And it actually slows your nervous system down. So step 1, try breathing. Step 2, try and ground yourself. So name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 that you can taste. That's a bit hard, that one, but it interrupts the panic loop by bringing you back to the present, like being you in that actual moment. You know, they say being present's awesome because it's a gift. Try it. I've done this before with a young boy at school when he was escalated, and I think he was only 8 years old, but rather than do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we did 3 things you could see, 2 things you can hear, and 1 thing you could smell. And he really slowed him down. He actually uses it at home now. So try and ground yourself. Do that. Practice it. It takes about 60 seconds. All right? It brings you right back to where you are there and then. And step 3, try and connect. My favourite word, not with a lecture, not with a fix, not with a presence of being right, but just being there. Sometimes it's saying nothing and just sitting beside someone. Sometimes it's one sentence saying, I'm here. Talk to me. I'm here if you want to talk. I'm here to listen. Ross Greene's collaborative problem solving method. Love it. Love this. Read his books. It's a game changer for behavior. It adds structure. Like empathize. I can see you're upset. Help me understand what's happening for you. If these aren't your words that you typically use, change them around. But just saying that you're seeing them in your present and you understand can help them feel safe. Define concerns. Here's what I need as the adult. I need you to be open. I need to be understanding of how you feel right now. They don't want to talk. Don't talk. Don't make them talk. That's one of the worst things going to trigger them even more. I've seen teachers do that before. Ask someone like 4 times, what's wrong? No, something's wrong. Tell me. You can open up to me. Tell me what's wrong. I can feel it. And they're like escalating even more. Like, leave me alone. Another one is collaborate. How can we work on this together? Maybe they say, well, we can't work on this together. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Why would you say we can't work on this together? Because you don't understand. You wouldn't get it. Oh, so what you're saying is you don't think I can understand. What is it I won't understand? And say it slowly, get those mirror neurons working so they're socio-emotionally going to be on the same connection line. It basically honours both perspectives. It says your feelings matter, and you know what? We will find a way forward. And here's part 3, real world examples. Let's make this real. So if you're a parent out there or you're parenting, and your teenager screams, I hate you, you're ruining my life. Like your instinct says yell back. It does, especially if you're emotional, your amygdala fires up. So emotional first aid says pause, breathe. Then later, maybe in the car when, eye contact feels less intense because you're looking straight ahead, not each other, say, I hear you. I know this feels huge for you, but let's figure it out together. That one sentence can turn a battlefield into a bridge. And it's hard. It's hard when you know that you're trying to keep that person safe or that your way is probably the correct way of doing it and you don't like being spoken to the way that the teenagers said that. But you're going to break the connection if you start having that to and fro and that fighting with each other. How about in the workplace? Your colleague explodes in a meeting and the old you might match their energy. Emotional first aid says ground yourself, soften your voice and respond with, I can see this is important to you. Can we take 5 minutes out and come back to it? And that tiny pause can save weeks of workplace attention. Again, if they're not your words, just say, hey, I can see that we're both getting escalated here. How about we just come back and grab a drink and we'll come back and have a chat later on. Does 1 o'clock suit? Look, set a time. That's what I suggest. Set a time and you've locked it in and then they actually feel like and know that's important for you to resolve that. How about the mate one? How about relationships? Your partner bursts out in frustration. You never listen to me. Instead of phoning back with a list of all the times that, they didn't listen to you or you didn't listen to them, emotional first aid says breathe, lower your shoulders and answer, I want to hear. Let's try again. Connection, not combat. That's what we need. And it's tough. It is so tough. It is so tough. Relationships are so hard. But end of the day, if you win an argument, what have you actually won? You make someone feel really bad. So try and work out where you can say, I'm sorry if you don't feel like I'm listening to you, but I am here for you. Can you just explain again what you mean by this? And one of my favorite ones I like using, which is people probably get sick of me at work doing this actually, is trying to use humor. But sometimes that's the most powerful tool in your first aid kit because life is often serious and life is often too serious. So I'm not talking about sarcasm. I'm not talking about belittling or putting someone down, but just a small reminder that the world isn't ending. So humor, I know you have to pick your times and that kind of stuff, but say if your teenager screams, you're the worst parent or grandparent ever, you might respond with, well, at least I made the top 10. So you might say that's sarcastic, but deep down the teenager's probably thinking, what? Oh, I just sort of gave him a backhanded compliment. What? And the humor can actually break out. It breaks a circuit. It doesn't dismiss their feelings. It reminds you both that you're human and that this moment will pass. Another favourite of mine is going up afterwards after having an argument, especially with the teenagers, and just say, look, I got it wrong. I think I got it wrong. I should have listened to you more. And it's a hard space because the era that I was born up in, and people listening about my age will know this, that back then we used to get the belt or the wooden spoon or, the ruler at school. I think I got the cane twice at school. and you're too scared to make a mistake or backchat or argue at all. And you had to have instant respect or you'd get flogged. Or you'd be scared of the tone of the voice of your parents. But it doesn't seem to work anymore. And you might say, well, maybe we should bring that back, Gary. But I think of those times when that happens, and yes, I had respect for my parents, but did it make me more connected? Did it make me value the relationship more? I don't know. Probably not. So for people listening out there saying, well, that's a soft approach. Well, why is it soft? I think it actually takes more bravery and more tigger to actually be the person who can step back in that moment where you want to retaliate just to be right and save the connection. And by saving that connection, there's more chance of you bonding later on, and you'll probably get more respect later on. So look, here's an idea. Grab your journal. As I said, I love all your notes app on your phone. I'd make it real. I love doing this with people when they write down, remember, whatever gets measured, improved. So number one, write this down. Think of the last crisis you faced, and in those first 5 minutes, what did you do? Did it actually soothe the fire, or did it fuel the fire? And write it down honestly. Number two, imagine yourself as an emotional first aid responder. How would you show up in those first 5 minutes? Describe the breathing, grounding, or words now you would use instead of maybe if you were someone who, fueled the fire. And number three, write a sentence you'd want to carry in your pocket for the next crisis, like a phrase that says, I'm here, you're not alone, we'll get through this. What is something that you would say? And this might change depending on the relationship and who you're speaking with. But what's one mantra, one sentence you could actually say next time there's a conflict? You're going to say really quiet, use those mirror neurons, slow your voice right down and say, I hear you're frustrated. I'm sorry if you think it's me or if I've upset you, but I'm here for you, you're not alone. Talk to me about it. Would that help? Or is what you're doing enough? Emotional first aid isn't about fixing everything. It's about holding space until the storm passes. And the first 5 minutes of crisis will not erase the pain. It won't. But what it can do is change the story. So the next time that life blindsides you, remember, breathe, ground, connect. You may not feel it much, but sometimes presence is the most powerful medicine. And who knows? Those 5 minutes could save not just a relationship, but a life.